and tourism for the what we'll do our work on today. So we'll get started in a few minutes, but we'll just I want to ask if any other bill introductions. In case somebody have any bill introductions. Today's the last day. Seeing none. Hello. It sounds like it's on. All right, I'll just speak a little louder, if nothing else. All right, so we'll begin with a report from Luke. Run through the parts of the bill, and we'll take a look at that.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Luke Drury. I am a fiscal analyst with Legislative Research, and I will be going through the Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism budget for you all, and you all should have that budget analysis. Awesome. All righty. So again, my name is Luke. Behind me here is Steve Adams. He is the Director of Federal Aid and Budget, and he will plan to offer some testimony for you all and be able to answer questions as well after I run through the budget analysis. Here on page 1 is large overview of the agency along with a blurb there about what it is that they do. Executive summary down at the bottom, and that carries forward into page 2 and page 3. I would actually like to begin my presentation though on page 4.
All right.
So as you can see from the bottom table there, from FY 2015 to FY 2019, the agency had no SGF expenditures. In 2020, the governor recommended and legislature approved $2 million for emergency park repairs, and that was after the flooding events in 2019. The agency expended $1 million of that in 20, and then the rest of it in 2021. No SGF expenditures in 2022, and none have been approved for 23. Now, the governor is recommending, and we'll get into this a little bit in more detail as we move through the budget analysis, but the governor is recommending for FY 2024 $3.1 million SGF for the agency, and of that amount, $600,000 would go towards the purchase of the Loveland Wildlife Area, and $2.5 million would go to one-time dam repairs for various dams all throughout the state. Moving on to page 5. We have a couple of their large fee funds that the agency uses. The top is Parks Fee Fund and the bottom is Wildlife Fee Fund. And these are just charts for you all to see the various trends in revenues and expenditures. For Parks Fee Fund, as you all may well know, whenever you go to the parks, whenever you go camping, etc., sometimes you'll pay like a $5 admittance fee, those sort of things. That goes into the Parks Fee Fund. The agency then uses that to operations, maintenance, etc. at the parks. Same thing with Wildlife Fee Fund. Whenever I go to purchase my tags each year or my hip stamp, items such as that nature, that goes into the Wildlife Fee Fund, which again goes back into wildlife conservation efforts, the different wildlife areas that the agency manages. And then if we turn on over to page 6, that's when we'll get into a little bit more detail. So the table up at the top, we start with the 2020 approved amount. We identify any changes that have happened, legislatively approved. We'll go through the agency revised and then governor recommendations. Per normal, the numbers on the left-hand side, so reappropriations from economic developments is number 1. That will correspond with the numbers listed below. So subsequent to the 2022 legislative session, there was one adjustment that was made to the appropriated amount for wildlife and parks, and that is a reappropriation of $78,682. So reappropriations are monies that were unspent in a given year and then roll forward into the new year. So that is to say that the agency carried over $78,000 from 2022 into 2023, and the agency is estimating to expend all of that amount in the current year. In addition to that, the agency estimates revised expenditures totaling $100.7 million, including $224,457 from the Water Plan Fund and $3.7 from the Economic Development Initiatives Fund. And then we'll go ahead and run through the different supplemental requests that are included in the agency's request. So item number 2 is a supplemental request for law enforcement software maintenance. The agency requests $157,000 from the Parks Fee Fund for annual maintenance expenditures related to software used by the agency's law enforcement program. Turning over then to page number 7. The agency requests $100,000 from the Parks Fee Fund for increased utilities expenditures at the campgrounds across the state. Item number 4 is a supplemental request for vehicle expenditures. Agency requests $140,000 from the Park Fee Fund for increased expenditures associated with gasoline and vehicle repairs. Item number 5 is a supplemental request for body cameras. The agency requests $35,000 from the Parks Fee Fund for body cameras to be utilized by the agency's law enforcement program. The agency's request also includes increases to salaries and wage expenditures, including changes to fringe benefit rates. Agency also requests an additional 3 FTE positions above the approved number. The additional 3 FTE positions are located in the agency's fish program and are related to federal funds for invasive aquatic species. I will note that the increase for salaries and wages that the agency is estimating, that is related to the 2022 pay plan that was passed by the legislature, that the agency is estimating as a result of increased salaries that they will be able to fill more positions, thereby lowering vacancy rates, and therefore they are estimating an increase in salaries and wage expenditures in 2023 because of easier time finding and hiring employees. The governor's recommendation for 2023 is $100.5 million, including $224,457 from the Water Plan Fund and $3.7 from the EDIF. The recommendation is a decrease of $132,000 from the agency's request, and the governor is recommending, and you can see here, item number 7, the governor recommends $300,000 all from special revenue funds to finance additional body-worn cameras and increased operational expenditures, but then the governor does not recommend any other agency supplemental requests. So $300,000 again for body-worn cameras and other operational expenditures, but none of the other agency requested items are included in the governor's recommendation.
Back up on that body cameras on supplemental number 5. It says request just wants $35,000 from the Parks Fee Fund to go into that whole. Okay, how many cameras does that buy? Anybody know?
Mr. Chair, I don't know exactly how many cameras the agency estimated with the $35,000, but I can check into that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we look at the other supplemental requests, when they're talking about wanting another $100,000 from the fee fund for increased utility expenditures, these are for the people that are staying at the parks, or on behalf of the people that stay in the parks. What if you don't pay your utility bill and you get shut off?
Mr. Chair, I do believe that if I personally did not pay my utility bill, it would likely be turned off.
We wouldn't do that.
Should I continue on? Okay.
Senator Dahl had a question. I missed
Sure.
it.
How many employees is the agency short right now since the 2020?
Mr. Chair, and to answer the senator's question, I don't know exactly how many vacant positions the agency has right now, but I can check in on that.
Oh, Senator Fagg, this question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we're stopped on this, could you talk a little bit about that 3.1 million, the Lovewell National or Wildlife Area? If we're buying that, who owns that now?
Mr. Chair, if it's okay with the chair and the senator, that's in 2024. I can get there when we go through our 2024 analysis.
Talk about that then. Okay. I'd be interested in who we're buying that from and why we have to fix it. We'll catch it later here then.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on then, on to page number 8. This shows expenditures 2023 change from actual, so that is to say what the agency's request is versus what actually happened in FY 2022. That's some informational stuff there for you all, but I do want to go ahead and just continue on to page 9 for the 2024 analysis. So similar to 2023, we'll start off with, for 2023, we start off with legislative approved. For 2024, we start off with the agency revised estimate for 2023. We identify any changes that the agency is making within that, adjust for that, and we show that in agency request and then also the governor's recommendation. So the agency requests a total of $106.1 million from all funding sources, and that's $457 from the Water Plan Fund, along with $3.7 million from the EDIF. The request is an increase of $5.5 million, or 5.4% above 2023 revised estimates. The increase is attributable to enhancement requests for law enforcement software, utilities, and vehicles. The agency also requests an increase in capital improvements expenditures of $5.4 million, or 32%, and this is primarily attributable or can be seen in fish and wildlife, wetlands development, motorboat access, and shooting range development. So again, just as with 2023, the table above has numbers listed, and then below those you can identify and follow those as we go on. So item number 1, underneath the agency's request, is for law enforcement software maintenance. The agency requests $165,000 from the Park Fee Fund for annual maintenance expenditures related to software used by the agency's law enforcement program. Item number 2, utility expenditures. So you'll see a theme. Some of these are the same as in 2023 requests in 2024. $150,000 for utility expenditures at campgrounds. Item number 3, vehicle expenditures, $150,000 from Parks Fee Fund for increased expenditures for gasoline and repairs for vehicles. And then item number 4, agency request includes capital improvement expenditures of $22.4 million. Again, that's an increase of $5.4 million above the agency's request for 2023. And we'll be able to see this a little bit further on when we get to the capital improvement section at the very back of the analysis. You'll be able to see the different areas that the agency invests in when it comes to capital improvements and changes year over year. And then if we turn over onto page 10, we'll get into the governor's recommendation. The governor is recommending expenditures totaling $112.2 million, including $3.1 million SGF, $224,457 Water Plan Fund, and $4.2 million from the EDIF. Overall, the increase is $6 million above the 2024 request from the agency, and the governor does not recommend adoption of the agency's enhancement request. However, the recommendation does include $325,000 additional for operational expenditures. Item number 5 is that Lovewell Wildlife Area. The governor recommends the addition of $600,000 general fund to allow the agency to purchase the Lovewell Wildlife Area. Dam repairs, governor is recommending $2.5 million SGF for one-time dam repairs. Law enforcement moving to KPNF. The governor is recommending the addition of $2.5 million, all from special revenue funds, to allow law enforcement officers working for wildlife and parks to move to the Kansas Police and Firemen's retirement system. Currently, they are on the normal state employee CAPER system, so this would move those law enforcement officers to KPNF. Item number 8 is for Parks and Trails. This is a recommendation to add $500,000 from special revenue funds for Parks and Trails. I will note that part of this is operational expenditures and part of this is capital improvements as well. So again, when we get to the capital improvement section, I'll identify that and show that and point that out. The governor is also recommending $74,716 from special revenue funds and an additional FTE position to allow the agency to hire a legal assistant. Park operations, the governor is recommending $325,000 all from special revenue fund for across the board, just increased operational costs. And then as mentioned earlier, the governor is not recommending any agency enhancement requests, but does include the parks operation item in her recommendation. Mr. Chair, I can continue on or I can stand for questions.
That legal assistant, so right now they don't have a legal assistant, they're needing one. That's what the appropriation is for.
Mr. Chair, from my understanding is that the agency currently does not have a legal assistant, and this would allow them to hire one.
Thank you. Senator Fagg. Oh, I mean, Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It had $150,000 from the Parks Fee Fund for increased expenditures associated with gasoline and vehicle repairs. That's just for 1 year, right?
Mr. Chair and Senator, that would be correct. That is a one-year deal. However, though, that could potentially move over into 2025. The agency hasn't submitted a 2025, but we'll be able to identify that next session.
So it will roll over.
It perhaps could, likely.
That seems quite a lot for repairs and gasoline. So, thank you.
Senator Pay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The $500,000 for new trails, the question I have, when I look at this, where do we have money to take care of what we already have? I think there's a lot of improvements that need to be made. This repair stuff I keep hearing about. I don't see anything in there, but we're out doing new trails, just a comment to me. I'd rather take care of what we got than get something new. So, do you have any, can you answer that, or am I missing something here?
Mr. Chair, to answer the Senator's question, there is in the capital improvement section, and I would like to get there here in just a bit. There is expenditures in there for the ongoing maintenance of various trails all across the state, but the governor is recommending these dollars go above and beyond what is currently being taken care of by the department.
Okay, so we're going to cover that here in a minute. Okay.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. On page 10, number 7, item number 7, when it talks about the law enforcement, the KP&F, I have two questions. One, why do they want to join the police and fireman retirement system? Why do they want to get out of capers? And number two, why we need to put in $2.5 million special revenue funds in there? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, to answer the Senator's question, those are very good questions, and I will need to look into that to get back. I don't believe I can speak as to why the move from capers, but I can certainly look into the why for the increase to move them to KP&F.
Is there anybody from the department want to comment on that? Certainly.
Steve Adams, Department of Wildlife and Parks. Senator, there broadly are two reasons or actually three reasons for the move to KPF. One is retention of officers. That is an area where we currently are struggling to retain staff because the package that local entities and other entities are able to offer with the combination of benefits and salary, we simply are struggling to retain those officers. They move on. But the other two reasons are, and the primary one is that it's a safety issue. It's a safety of the employee and a safety for the public issue. You have someone, I'll use myself as an example, if I were in law enforcement, a capers employee moving towards retirement, my age, in a law enforcement situation where you encounter a much younger individual that potentially you have to deal with in a physical situation. Do you want a 65-year-old in a law enforcement position? And we have had staff who have left the agency because of that reason. KPF offers law enforcement personnel of the state an opportunity to retire at an earlier age or to move on to a different position. But the retirement for KPF employees is earlier, it's younger. And frankly, law enforcement is a young person's profession when you are talking about field staff. And that's one of the big reasons. But the other reason really is it is something that most other law enforcement entities within the state offer, and it becomes a competitive issue for us in the recruitment and retention of law enforcement staff, if that answers your question.
Yes, in a sense it does. I still don't understand why we have to put in $2.5 million into that for them to move over, and I can understand the requirements for retiring early, but I know we have shored up capers that it's pretty well, it's not going to go under or anything like that. That was kind of my concern why they did that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You had talked about retention of employees, your FTEs. How many open positions do you have right now?
In our law enforcement division, and we have law enforcement staff in 3 different divisions. Our law enforcement division is what you think of as the game wardens. We also have certified law enforcement staff in our parks division. That would be the park ranger and the park manager. And then we have some law enforcement certified staff in our public lands division. And typically that is only the public lands manager for that area. In our law enforcement division, the last time I spoke with our law enforcement director about it, we had a 30% vacancy rate. And that is directly due to we simply, at this point in time, are unable to compete with other entities and to retain those employees. Their salary is higher elsewhere. Their benefits are better elsewhere. So the way I would couch it is we don't want to be a training ground where we get someone where they are marketable and then they leave. And that's what we are seeing occur.
So if we've got 30 opening positions, as far as money, shouldn't you have some excess money in your budget? I mean, you're not paying these, there isn't anybody.
Well, we are trying to fill those positions.
I understand, but you've got money
So
sitting out there in your budget. Where does that money go?
That money, well, if it isn't expended, then the majority of the money for the law enforcement division comes from the wildlife fee fund. There is a portion of it, about 7%, that is matched to a federal grant. Those funds are not expended because they are designated for salary. They are not expended if we don't have the staff in place. And of course, like every other agency, we have some rate of positions being empty at all times. So, some of that will occur, but right now it's abnormally high. The $2.5 million is an estimate. I'm not sure if you are aware, but there has been a bill introduced that would authorize the move to KPF. This is an attempt to identify those costs before we had the costs, but there is a cost to the agency to move those existing staff into the system, and then there is a difference in the employer rate of contribution for KPF employees, and it's approximately 10% higher than CAPERS employees. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, a KPF employee versus a CAPERS employee, it's about 12.5% to 13% for a CAPERS employee, and it's about 22% for a KPF employee. And those are ballpark, don't take those as exact.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding is all the money for KPNF would be special revenue funds. None of that would be state general fund.
Correct.
And then we heard some testimony during the special committee on employee compensation that I think was in December that talked about that this would actually be a benefit to the KPNF funds to have these additional individuals in that fund.
A larger pool of employees, contributions for employees to it, so it lowers the overall rate slightly for the overall pool.
And Mr. Chair, 2 more issues. One, the Lovewell Wildlife Area was identified, and that's Senate Bill number 105 would be the way that the legislature would authorize the purchase of that property. So we should see that bill in this committee. So it's the, unless it goes to Ways and Means, but it's in Jewell County, and it's adjacent to a Dex Unlimited property.
It's adjacent to the existing wildlife area.
Okay. And then the third thing is, we had some discussion in Joint Committee on State Building Construction about the dam repairs.
Yes.
So there was some question of, were federal funds available for those repairs? Why are we using SGF rather than looking to the federal build or ARA or whatever other acronyms they have for federal funding?
Well, there are a variety of potential funding sources. Most federal funding sources require a match, but there is also a very defined need. We have over 100 earthen dams that the agency currently manages of various sizes, and most of those structures have some age to them. And dams always require maintenance. At times, they require major maintenance. And that's the situation we find ourselves in now. Our engineering section has told us we need to invest in those dams to make sure that they continue to be able to provide the services, but also that they are safe. And so we are intentionally trying to go through that inventory, that system of dams, identify the maintenance needs that are there and address those needs. And when you manage a large number of dams, there are always going to be maintenance needs. It's just part of owning that type of structure. And we are at that time. Many of our dams have been around a long time. Some of them date from the CCC days during the Depression, but none of them are new. So standards change over time. The standards that, for instance, the Division of Water Resources will tell us a dam needs to have, that requires an investment to bring those up to code. At times, the structure itself needs attention. One of the needs that we have right now is to systematically go through those dams, look at the water control structures, and by that I mean the valves that allow us to manage the water level, release water at times when that is needed, and to close that off at times when it is needed. But make sure those are in good shape and functional so that if we need to make those operational changes, we can do so and do so safely.
So, Mr. Chair, to follow up, so there would be intent from the agency to look at using those state funds to match federal grants if federal grant funds are available?
Wherever it is available, we would do so. We would make that money go as far as we possibly could.
Have you ever had any dam failures?
That I know of, I've been with the agency 34 years. I do not remember a dam failure. We have had some events where we had significant damage to a structure, and there was a risk that if we had another large rainfall event, that something could have occurred. But I'm not aware that we've had a structure of any size fail in that time frame.
That's good. We're glad to hear that. Senator Fagg.
Back on the dam here, or this piece of property that we're wanting to purchase, are we trying to buy this from Ducks Unlimited?
You're talking about the Lovewell property? Yeah. I don't believe Ducks Unlimited owns this property. I think it is owned by another conservation entity at this point in time.
My question to you would be, whenever we look at value, and this is how much we want, if there's a dam that needs $2.5 million worth of expenses done to it, is that factored into the price? Or are we buying something that's got a big problem and then we're supposed to fix it?
Well, in this case, we are not buying a dam. This is property adjacent to an existing area we manage around a federal reservoir.
We own this dam right now, the 2.5 million?
No, these are separate issues.
Okay.
Okay. The purchase of the property at Lovewell does not, that I am aware of, does not have any kind of, does not have a pond or other structures on it. Okay. I have not visited the site, but I'm not aware of there being a dam on it. The 2.5 is to address maintenance needs in the existing network of dams that we have across the state, like the state fishing lakes.
Okay, all right, I'm with you now. Thank you.
Other questions? Adam? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just sit tight, close. Go ahead, Luke.
Yep, and then thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. If we could then, just turn to page 29. That is the capital improvement section. If you all remember from the very beginning of the presentation, we saw levels of revenues and expenditures from Parks Fee Fund and Wildlife Fee Fund, and you would have noticed that there's increased expenditures from Wildlife Fee Fund. This table here does a really good job to show you Wildlife Fee Fund is where a lot of these different capital projects, Wildlife Fee Fund is used. So as you can see, for example, fish and wildlife maintenance areas is at $5 million for 2023, and then that goes to $6.2 million in 2024. Another item that you can take a look, shooting range development is at $1.2 million in the current year, and that is estimated to go to $2.1 million. So that makes up those changes or those increased expenditures from Wildlife Fee Fund. I do want to mention to the committee as well, to Senator Fagg's question, trails development is at $700,000, and that's ongoing expenditures. And then the governor's recommendation does put in a little bit extra there for more. And then we did talk about the $600,000 for the Lovewell Wildlife Area, and as Senator Francisco indicated, that is Senate Bill 105. I believe it's 168 acres, and so that has to be passed through legislative action per statutes. And then in addition to that, there is that $2.5 million SGF for one-time dam repairs. If you continue on then onto page 30 and towards the back, that will give a blurb on all the different types of projects that the agency takes care of, along with the dollar figure that it is estimated to be at. And, actually on page 31, it's 268 acres is what I have here for the Lovewell Wildlife Area. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would note that before the capital improvement sections as well are sections that go through different programs within the agency, from public land, wildlife areas, et cetera. But with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for any other questions that the committee may have.
Questions from Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This 2.5 coming out of SGF, why doesn't that come out of fee fund?
Mr. Chair, to answer the senator's question, the governor's recommendation is that it come from 2.5, come from the general fund. For some of the agency fee funds, for example, wildlife fee fund, and then I think it's their motorboat or fish fee fund. Anyway, there are strict rules from the federal government that dictate what you can and cannot use those funds for. So I'm unsure as if whether or not they would be allowable, but the governor's recommendation is to use general fund for the dam repairs as opposed to any other agency fee funds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, Senator Fagg asked a question that who are we buying this land from? I don't think we ever got an answer, did we?
Mr. Chair, that is another conservation group, and I believe that is Pheasants Forever. And I think that if you look at, because the question came up before with Senate Bill 105, and it lists the parcel number in Senate Bill 105, and if you type that into like Jewell County GIS or whatever, it'll show you who the owner is, and that's Pheasants Forever.
Any other questions? Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 31, almost down at the end, fifth one up, shooting range development, which I think these are good things to have, but where do they take place? So how many do we have? Do you have any idea?
Mr. Chair, in order to answer the senator's question, I'll have to look into that. I do not know off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Adam, you know that?
I can, thank you, Steve Adams, Wildlife and Parks. I can cover most of the locations, but I may miss some. There are a few smaller ones, but the major locations are where the larger shooting ranges are Hillsdale, which there is a relatively new, as in the last decade, modern shooting range. El Dorado, adjacent to both of these are near the state parks in terms of location, if you're familiar with the locations, or near the dam. There is a relatively new, last 10 to 15 years, modern shooting range. There was one just north of town here at Shawnee State Fishing Lake. That one, because of the need for major repairs, is currently closed. There is one at Fancy Creek that has just been completed, just been upgraded and completed. And Fancy Creek is about mid-lake on Tuttle Creek Reservoir, north of Manhattan. And then there is one at Cheney Reservoir. And Cheney is the one that we intend to move to next. It's been there a very long time. It really needs to be upgraded to meet current standards. And that's the next one on the list to have major work done on it. And then, of course, there are needs in other areas, and periodically we will come back to the legislature with the idea of where the demand exists and where we feel like the appropriate locations are. But right now, those are the major sites.
Thank you very much. I live in southwest Kansas. I just didn't know of any. Outside of me, we have a little place where we go out and shoot, and I just didn't know of any in our area. Thank you.
Well, just so that I'm correct in understanding, probably this is for our budget analysis, but that of the 112, a little more than $112 million that are being spent, only $3,100,000 is state general funds, so less than 3% of the budget of this agency is state general funds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd have to run the numbers really quick, but off glance, Senator Francisco, that would be 3.1 for the governor's recommendation, 3.1 million from the general fund, and then when you look at all funds, that would be 112.2 million. Like I say, I'm not real good at the quick math on that, but I could run it to get the percent.
Sorry. That doesn't seem to be a lot of state general funds, less than 3% for the value from our wildlife and parks areas.
Thank you very much. It looks like we're in a situation here, where do you spend the money, where the priorities are, so we've got to keep that in mind as we go on forward. So, any other questions? Seeing none, Mr. Smith, you have any final comments? Adam?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just say that the department does support the budget recommendations. We appreciate the time of the committee in considering our budget, and if you have questions, we would be most happy to either get the answers for you or attempt to answer them. Thank you.
That's important, getting the answer. John? Committee, we don't have any more questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question that's not on this budget, but on the next 2 days' work.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm wondering if it would be possible for us to get the budgets both for the Department of Health and Environment and the Water Office budget tomorrow, so that we'd have an extra day and make sure that we get our questions so that we can get all that work done on Thursday. Would it be possible to distribute the budget for the Water Office tomorrow?
Mr. Chair, I do have the Water's Office budget. It's still currently in draft form. We're in the process, very, very close to finalizing and publishing, but I do believe that should be no issue. We can have those, at least in the draft copy, to you all by tomorrow. And in fact, I can get the Water Office stuff over to you all today. I'll have it over to you today.
It's for the meeting on Wednesday, but if tomorrow we would get those two budgets, then we'd have like 2 days before we're making our final recommendations on all these budgets.
So what are your wishes for, do Do we want to deliberate another time over wildlife and parks? Or are we satisfied we can move forward?
Well, the calendar shows that we're going to make our recommendations on wildlife and parks on Thursday. Is that not the case? And I would prefer to have more members of the committee here. But if you want to just approve the budget, I'm happy to make that motion.
We don't have to go back and do it over.
Well, we wouldn't do the hearing over. We would just do our recommendations, and our calendar says that we're going to do our recommendations for all 3 agencies on Thursday. So I'm just trying to, because this has been published for the public, I would assume that they would feel that they could give us any comments between now and then, unless that calendar's changed for tomorrow. So I'm assuming we would make all our recommendations on Thursday.
Including the one that
Yes.
roll it over into Thursday.
This is for Thursday.
I think it's doable. Let's just do it like that. Get all 3 of them, end our deliberations in one big move. Pardon me? Oh, that's probably a good thing. We're just deliberating on the side, and we're talking about, we're going to put everything in the box for Thursday. That'll include this one and KDH&E and then the other one. Who else is in that group? Water office. Okay? We need a motion, we'll just keep that as a.
I don't think we need a motion because that's what
Scheduled anyway.
we're scheduled anyway.
Just putting an extra one in there. Okay, we'll do it that way. So mark it down for Thursday to review all those at one time, so. And deliberate, so you got questions, make sure you bring them.
And and Mr. Chair, if I may, if anybody from the committee has any questions, issues, whatnot on wildlife and parks, and then I have water office as well. Megan Leopold in our office has KDH&E. If you all have any questions prior to deliberations and that as well, feel free to send me an email, give me a call, stop on by. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Luke. Appreciate that. With that, that pretty well settles. Agreed to meet on Thursday and take care of those all at one time and deliberate, and turn it in. So with that, thank you very much. We are adjourned.